Hello, everyone. I see ZhengWei you have right?
Yep, I'm here, Sergey.
Great. So, we'll probably wait for maybe 5 more minutes, or 5 until like people join. So, and then
Sure.
start. In the meantime, can you please check? I mean, that the screen sharing works, because there are some options which you might need to try. Great.
Can you see well?
Yeah, awesome.
All right.
Thanks. So. So I think we start the summer school session number 2 right now. So it's the first time we do the summer school online. So not everything is perfect. So we just realized there are 2 links. So, but I think people will join the session 2 as well soon. And we have so I mean, there is, of course, there is no this pleasure to meet physically in one place like it was in the previous summer schools. But the good side of it that we can have people like from all over the world to be able to participate in the session. So today we're going to have people, I think, at least from like 5 or more countries. So, and I'm happy to welcome here our first teacher, speaker in the summer school, ZhengWei, ZhengWei Quah, who is founder and the CEO of the Accredify. And previously, we had a pleasure to work together with crypto finance exchange Like, and ZhengWei was the managing director of Like in Asia, and promoted a lot of the decentralization and blockchain ideas in this part of the world. And so our session today is devoted to the probably the next big thing in crypto, which is digital identity, and which is, I think, largely a very kind of poorly defined concept, which has many different sides, and it's like an elephant. And how can a blind man guess what is an elephant, right? So one thing is it's self-sovereign identity, and one thing is decentralized identity. So one thing is should be privacy preserving. So there's many elements to it, and we'd like to start to discover this elephant, and I would like to pass the floor to ZhengWei, who is working a lot in this self-sovereign identity space, and he will explain maybe what he's doing and what he is, what's the best state of the art in this space now. ZhengWei, floor is yours.
Hey, thanks again. Good to go. You can see my screen and everything's well, right? Okay, good. That's good. Thanks, Sergey, for having me here. So a little bit about myself. My name is ZhengWei. I'm in Singapore right now. So I'm quite a newbie in the whole blockchain space, I would say. Started the journey in late 2016. And then in 2017, I joined Sergey. He was one of the co-founders at a crypto exchange called Dukkha. the fantastic journey, because in 2017, we saw the entire rise of crypto, saw the entire fall of crypto as well in 2018. So very, very exciting. And then since then, I've been obsessed with the whole usage of blockchain, change the way that the world works. So some of the things that I like to do is to see how blockchain can be utilized in real world use cases. So that's where it really brought me to founding Accredify in 2018, where we started to help schools to issue digital credentials, right? So right now we are mainly in Singapore, where we have helped the entire nation to put our academic digital credentials onto the blockchain. So that ties nicely with SSI, or decentralized identity, because with these verifiable credentials, you can then choose who you want to share them with and what you want to share. So this gives you the ownership and control of your data instead of having a third party selling your data on behalf of you. So having said that, I'm just going to go through a little bit about the company, what we've done, and then share with you, in addition to education, something very interesting that we have started in the past 6 months, right? So I'm sure you guys know what this is. You know, COVID-19 has forced the world to go digital, basically. In the past, things like the schools used to take months or even years just to go digital. Today is a snap of a finger because they have no choice. So back in February, they are forced to go home-based learning to change the way that they deliver education from physical to online. And then once they get things going, you realize that as the students finish curriculum, they need to give them a way to receive their certificate. And how do they do it? Through verifiable credentials, basically. So I'm not sure how many of you have seen this question before. So who led digitalization in your company? Usually, is it a CEO? Yep. Is it a CIO? You know, Chief Information, Chief Innovation Officer? Nope. That's actually COVID-19. This is just a joke around the internet, but it's pretty true. And what we've seen in the last 10 years is how the different economies have come into play. So we started with the sharing economy. So you have Uber, you have Airbnb, you have people like Grab, Gojek in the region, in Asia, you have mobile for bike sharing. But today, instead of a sharing economy, what COVID has forced us to go into is actually an isolation economy, right? So an isolation economy is where people are on their own, but they still interact with each other, and how businesses can come into play. So in the forced adoption, these are the changes in the behavior. From office, they became home-based. From dining, they became delivery. From gymming sessions, they're all becoming streaming. And why this leads back to credentials? Because digitalization is now a thing of the past. We now look at decentralization and how we can push that ownership back to the individuals in this isolation economy, and how they can interact with each other in not just a verifiable manner, but in a seamless way. So I'm going to go through something a little bit more technical here to share with you how we actually do it. When it comes to verifiable credentials, the tech stack that we use is actually using Ethereum as a blockchain. And we adhere to the different open schemas around the world. That includes things like W3C. That includes things like open certs, block certs, open attestation, and the different kind of schemas that are available. So the first step, the schools, they will issue a digital document in the form of credentials. And what we do with that digital document, we actually extract a fingerprint out of it. So the way we extract the fingerprint is through a hash. So hashing the entire document to get the certificate hash. We then place the hash onto the Ethereum blockchain. Thereafter, when the student receives the cert and pass it on to someone else, let's say it's an employer, a school, or even another country for their visa application, they can then regenerate the particular hash or fingerprint, so to say, compare it against the blockchain to show that it is tamper-proof, right? So the blockchain here actually serves as ledger in a way to show that the time at the point of timestamp till now, nothing in that document has been changed, and therefore you can rely on the contents inside. So that, okay, good, we solved the tamper-proof question. So later people start to ask, how do we then know that the cert came from the school itself, right? We just know that it has not been tampered. How do we know that it came from the school? So the way we solve it is that each of the school has a document store on the Ethereum blockchain in the form of a smart contract. Okay, so each of the school has a certificate store or document store on the blockchain in the form of a smart contract. And what they do is simply they own the smart contract through the private key, right? So only they can append records onto that smart contract, right? So using a mix of cryptography, what we provide to the school is actually a multi-signature wallet where they can sign and append the certificates onto the blockchain. They then put that certificate store onto their DNS as a DNS record, such that in the future, when I receive the cert, I can compare against the blockchain that it hasn't been tampered, and then I can extract the certificate store, compare to the DNS of the school, and know that it actually belongs to the school. So in a way, if you look at it, it's really how schools are no longer relying on a centralized solution in the past where I deposit all my credentials in a single location and have someone else verify against that. They're now decentralizing that on its own. So using website as a decentralized identity is something that I found pretty interesting as I embark on this journey. So now that we know that the school has issued that document and is tamper-proof, we can safely rely on it. So that's how the system works. So the process is pretty simple. It comes from the school. They will usually upload the data to our portal. It could be through an API or uploading through a CSV file, Excel file using a SAS model. We then create that document, put it into an education passport that can be shared with anybody, employer, higher education, any foreign immigration. So the beauty of this is that we can technically delete everything in our system, right? As long as the student has a copy of that document. So we are agnostic to the kind of identity mechanism that the students wish to use. For example, if there's an SSI system that the student prefer, they can simply upload their verifiable credentials into that, right? The beauty of this is that with that common standard, it can be shared across different identity mechanisms around the world. In Singapore, for example, we are not very advanced in terms of SSI yet. Rather, we have a very sophisticated national identity system, which we call a SingPass. So SingPass, in kind of broken down, is actually Singapore Pass, right? So the SingPass is actually a government-issued identity that can replace all physical identity. So you no longer need an identity card. You just need your SingPass mobile app. You can scan a QR code or whatever it is to prove that this is actually you. And with that, in Singapore, we actually work with SingPass, where we put the certs into the SingPass Skills Passport. So in different countries, there might be their individual country-based identity app, and we are agnostic. And the beauty of it, if there are SSI applications around the world, we can also pass it on to them, and they're all interoperable. So that's the fun part. So these documents are generally accessible anywhere and everywhere, and they can simply show a QR code to allow third party to verify it by rendering that particular document on the issuer's website. There's full privacy because you don't have to review everything in that document to show certain stuff. Give you an example. When we enter a certain location in the country, that requires you to be above 18, for example. And in the past, if you give your identity card to the person, you're revealing a lot of things that are unnecessary. You're revealing your address, you're revealing your actual identity number, your birth date, when these are actually unnecessary. So the beauty of verifiable credentials that we issue is that you can obfuscate certain data. And with the combination of zero knowledge proof, you can simply answer yes, no questions like, are you above 80? Yes or no. You don't have to tell the person your full birth date, for example. We also allow for easy sharing. And this is in the form of a unique link that expires so that you can simply share that link to someone else to view your credentials without having to share the entire file. So what we realized when we implement this in the real world use case is that there's always balance between privacy and convenience, right? A lot of academics or extremists, they may feel that privacy is the most important and you need 100% privacy. But in actual real life situation, we need to strike a balance. For example, if I issue you a verifiable credential, technically I can delete everything from my database. The school can delete everything from their database and you own your credential. But the downside of that is that if you lose that copy, it is gone forever. So what we realize in the market is that people still prefer to have a balance where they do want a backup somewhere in a trusted manner. But what they want is a choice and an option where if they decide to keep their credentials to themselves, they can do so. So if you're intending to utilize some of this technology in real world app or use case, do keep that in mind and do not just go one direction or the other direction without considering the actual implementation. So this is something that I wanted to share with you that is particularly interesting in the past 6 months that we have done. Although Accredify was predominantly in the education sector, because of the COVID situation, we started to move into the healthcare sector. Okay, so today we are building a digital immunity passport, which is a mobile app that contains all your healthcare records in a verifiable manner. And in that app, we have parties on the other side that can set certain frameworks to show that you are COVID compliant or not. And this, we are already in collaboration with the border controls to actually allow people to scan their COVID compliance and get through the border in a seamless way. So whatever we are doing here is to really facilitate the opening of the economies between countries. So Singapore has been pretty aggressive in this, and we have signed multiple green lane travel agreements with certain countries like China, Malaysia, Brunei, New Zealand, basically to reduce the amount of time that we need to be quarantined in a particular country. And in order to do that, there's a couple of things. You need to make sure that you're healthy, right? And how do we know that you're healthy? Through a verifiable records. So what's happening here is that the clinics is connected to us. They will issue an immutable record through us. Next, that immutable record gets stored in the digital immunity passport. And it contains an entire list of all the different documents that you have. You can either select one of them, two of them, three of them for verification purposes, or they can be bundled up together to satisfy certain compliance framework. For example, to get into Malaysia, you may need items A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But to get into China, you may need items D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. So these are the things that we can't control. We allow the counterparty to set their particular framework, and we simply enable the individual to adhere to it. And if you're missing certain elements of it, simply go take it and have it recorded in the immunity passport. And you shall be compliant to each of them. Thereafter, you can use it to go back to work, to go back to school, or even to traveling. We were roped into this by the Ministry of Health very urgently because in Singapore back in March, when the first outbreak happened, the main bulk of people that were affected were the foreign workers living in dormitories. So the dormitories is a very small living space with hundreds of people, up to 12 people in a single room condition. So COVID was spreading very, very quickly. And then once, because of the quarantine and having them in the care facilities, the ministry was unable to track who has been discharged, who has not been. So they were issuing physical discharge summaries to the workers, and using their physical discharge summaries, they are going back to work to show their employers, hey, I'm healthy. They're going back to the dormitories to say, hey, I can come back to stay. But it was difficult to track, easy to lose, and very easy to, just simply fake it, right? So therefore, we started working with the Ministry of Health. We took their data, we created an immutable record that the foreign worker can now show to the employers, to the dormitories to say that, okay, fine, I'm healthy, I can come back. So this was something that's been very interesting. And what we see going forward is that in each of the country, there will be an equivalent of the digital immunity passport. For example, in China, we are talking to Tencent and Alibaba. So Tencent and Alibaba are the overarching architect. And within each city, they are hiring their individual system integrator to implement for the cities. So we're hoping to find a way where we can do interoperable recognition of the records. Now, this is extremely important because in the past, in order to have this interoperability, you would then need to open up your database in a way or another, right? There has to be a way to verify that this actually came from the ministry, right? So, and how can you do that without opening, your database to say, okay, fine, you can check with me through an API, whatever it is. But with the introduction of decentralized technology like blockchain, we put that record onto a neutral ledger, and then the counterparty just check against their neutral ledger. So we are unlocking G2G collaboration in a way that wasn't possible in the past, I would say. So this is something extremely interesting, and everybody is using the blockchain. I was very surprised, to be honest, when I spoke to the guys in China, where they have all the health code to access domestic places. I thought that it would be a centralized solution where they just have a depository of people that are healthy and people that are not, and then get access. But it's not. It's on the blockchain. So this has allowed us to speed up our collaboration. Same thing with the Netherlands site, where they have what we call it Unlock, UNLOCK, doing something similar to what we do. So as a conclusion, I think we are all trying to find the new norm coming up after COVID. And I think you will hear a lot more about distributed ledger, about SSI going forward, and how SSI can allow you to own your own verifiable credentials and therefore create an entire profile of yourself and share what you want and share to whom you want to share with. So with this new norm, I'm looking forward to how it goes, and I'm going to stop my presentation here, and because I have about 5 to 10 minutes left in case there's any question from the floor. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, ZhengWei. So we have some time for the questions. So if you want to ask, you can ask just in the chat or by voice, by raising your hand, whatever you prefer. And
Сереж, есть вопросик, но мне кажется, наш гость не понимает по-русски.
I will translate the Russian into English.
Спасибо тебе большое. Я хотел бы, чтобы наш спикер отмотал назад 2 слайда назад Два
Can you go
слайда.
back? Can you go back to slides in your presentation?
Yes. Вопрос такой. Относительно последнего квадрата, когда есть цифровое приложение с паспортом по иммунитету и взаимодействие с различными организациями. Школа, работа, туристические организации, ну и, видимо, путешествия в другие страны. Собственно, вопрос обмена информацией всегда подразумевает вопрос формата этой информации. Я вижу, что цифровой паспорт на эфире, но, то есть, условно, показать с экрана телефона что-то, где стоит галочка «Подтверждено в эфире», окей, но как с точки зрения своих внутренних процессов школы, корпорации, другие страны и их администрации вот воспринимают, или как легитимизировать с точки зрения их внутренних процессов цифровые сертификаты, которые делают уважаемый спикер.
Okay, I will try to translate. So, in this slide, you actually have the digital immunity app, which contains those like credentials which are verified and they're hashed on the public blockchain like Ethereum. And then you have those who should consume those certificates, like the schools, like the the companies, the travel agencies, and so on. Like the question is, like, in your experience, how do those institutions basically they really perceive these public blockchains? How they can are comfortable with like taking information which is from those public blockchains like Ethereum in your experience? ZhengWei, you're on mute.
Yeah. I just realized. There are two things that I want to share in this, right? The first one is that we stopped using the word blockchain for a long time. We stopped using the word blockchain because once you use the word blockchain, people have two thoughts. Are you a scam? You're too difficult. I don't want to hear anymore. So very interesting. We stopped using the word blockchain and we simply explain the objective behind the blockchain. And usually people are happy with that, right? But if you have a little bit knowledge on the tech side, then they will ask you, okay, it's tamper-proof, but how do you do it? And if the person is curious enough to ask you, he or she will be able to understand the process. So that's one. We stop using the word blockchain. And the second part of it is we realize that people don't need to verify everything. So most of the time when we provide the app, people are more or less relying on it without questioning it. So what we provide is not an error-proof solution, but a proof of error solution. So if you want to verify, you can. Or if something goes wrong, you are able to track all the way to what and who went wrong. Okay, so I understand your concern that why would people believe the public blockchain and all. To be honest, if you don't talk about it, nobody is going to question you about it. That is what we have realized been working very, very, very well for us. We just tell the schools that this is a verifiable document. Okay, they say okay. Then if they are interested, they will ask, how is it verifiable? Then you explain to them and then they will understand. But then if you straight from day one say, it is verifiable because you put on the blockchain and the hash and the public, and there's a minus in the word, private and public key, you pay the gas fee, so you cannot fit. People just shut off. So if you can, don't talk about it. That will work so much better, I believe. I mean, I don't think that answers your question fully, but that's my thought and what has worked very well for us.
Okay. Thank you very much, ZhengWei. And so thanks for sharing the thoughts, and wish you all the best in your journey for the COVID certificates, which is so much needed now in the world to open up again. Thanks. And so we're now moving to the next part of our session. So I'd like to introduce you Paula Berman and she, I mean, again, thanks for the online format. She's able to join from Brazil to our summer school, which was never envisioned before, I think. And Paula is a part of the movement which is called Democracy Earth, which sees its mission to kind of create a post-nation electronic democracies and empower them with all the mechanisms they need to to govern and to vote, to basically make decisions online. And I think this is going to be the first time you'll hear her speak about the new preprint of the paper, which is just recently published about the review of the proof of personhood approaches. So, so Paula, I'm giving the microphone to you. So please try to share your thoughts on this.
Hi, Sergey. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Sergey. I'm really excited to be talking about digital identity. This is super exciting to be discussing, especially in these times of, COVID, and when digital identity becomes even more relevant for us to be able to overcome some of the challenges here. But my presentation is going to be less specific and maybe a little less practical than the former one. This is going to be about a review that I authored with Sergey and Santiago City and Divya Siddharth. And this is, let me my screen here with you guys. Can you see it? Can you see my slides? So basically this review, the name is Who Watches the Watchmen? A review of subjective approaches for Sybil-resistance in Proof of Personhood protocols. This is a bit of a mouthful, so let me just give a better name for our conversation. It's a review of approaches to ensure that each unique human only gets one identity in a domain. So this is a big, very, very big, difficult challenge to overcome, but it's also a very promising one. One of the reasons why this matters, to be able to each unique human to only have one identity, it's because this can have a big economic impact and a big political impact. So on the economic side, this could enable a universal basic income with cryptocurrencies. So if we're trying to implement that, the main vulnerability is that people could create fake identities to be able to get more universal basic income. So if we have such a protocol in place, then we can safely deploy that without running that risk. And obviously, if people are creating fake identities, then this currency would be worthless. So in order for us to really be able to structure such a scheme, we need a secure identity and Sybil-resistant identity system in place. And the second is because this is key for us to enable peer-to-peer democracy. So when we're voting online, we also want to make sure that people are not voting twice. So this would, or otherwise this would delegitimize the votes of everybody else. So we want to make sure that each person is only voting once. And if we're able to structure that, then we're able to have very strong peer-to-peer democracies basically emerge anywhere with an internet connection. So this is a project with very, very strong potential. But again, it's very difficult to figure this out. So in order for us to understand this, I'm just going to be looking at this title, and we're going to be breaking it into pieces and talking about each one of them. So the first part is who watches the watchman. What we really meant here is who verifies the verifier, but that didn't sound that cool. So we're talking about the identity verifier, and the need to ask this question comes from the fact that whoever has the ability to verify identity is actually having a lot of power. And we know that because we know what can happen when this entity, even if it's a network, a protocol, or if it's a centralized entity, we know what can go wrong if this is not well structured, if there's no accountability, because we have social media identity, which has largely demonstrated some of the perils there. So first, I'm going to talk about the bright side of social media identity, because it also helps us understand what is potential for decentralized ID. So I'm arguing here that identity is really the secret sauce of Facebook, Twitter, Google, and these organizations establish themselves largely by achieving a sufficient level of consensus over their identity credentials. And in doing so, they broke a monopoly. Really, prior to social media, only nation states had the ability to create identity systems that had such widespread use. And these are our passports, national ID cards. So this new global identification system that was created by social media and that was outside of the strict control of nation states created a new networked social infrastructure for society and a new trust layer. And on top of this trust layer, we started to have a new kind of participative politics with multiple political movements that have completely changed our national and international politics over the past few years. So here we can see a bit of the connection between identity and politics. But we know that the story is not that simple. With social media identity, we also have the dark side, which that in these systems, algorithms basically have an upper hand over humans. So these private organizations that hold all of this data about us, they have started turning prediction of human behavior into influence of human behavior. And this led to the emergence of surveillance capitalism. This centralized architecture for identity also exposes our society to political manipulation. So we have seen this with Cambridge Analytica, exploiting identity-related data to create false ads. We have seen an increase in international meddling in elections. And then a third element here is that this social media-based identity creates a kind of illusion of participation for us. So when we're in this social network, in this infrastructure, this new trust layer that was created for humanity, we are participating and making comments, and we're liking things, and we're sharing things, but these things have no institutional impact. We get the illusion that we're really changing something, and this illusion that we're doing something might be even worse than actually having no participation, because when we have the illusion of participation, then this actually can demobilize us to take concrete action about the things that we care about. So it also is a system that leads to some degree of apathy. So this is Edward Snowden, and somewhere not so far from where you guys are in Russia, he gave this presentation last year, and he said that the one vulnerability being exploited in all systems is identity. And again, he's pointing out the crucial role of identity in structuring even our political systems, and of course he's speaking about surveillance as well here. So this is the who watches the watchmen part, and why we're asking this question, why it's important to understand what are the accountability measures that are in place for systems that are connected to identity. Now I'm going to look at the Sybil-resistance part. So this is referring to the Sybil attack, which is basically describing the abuse of peer-to-peer systems by creating fake identities. So a peer system, basically there's nobody who is allowing people in or not. There's nobody controlling, anyone can join. And then a major vulnerability in these systems is that basically people can create multi-IDs and pretend that they are coming from different people when they're in fact all connected to one person. So blockchain-based networks are peer-to-peer systems, so they also needed to come up with a solution for the Sybil attack. And in order to do that, they have employed resource-based Sybil protection mechanisms. In Bitcoin, this is called proof of work, and the resource that they use in order to authenticate membership is CPU power, mining power. And in proof of stake, we are looking at validating membership through financial stake. So here with proof of work, we have a 1 CPU, 1 vote system, and proof of stake, it's a $1, 1 ETH, or whatever cryptocurrency you're using, 1 vote system. So these systems are, because they're based on resources, they are inherently plutocratic. This has led to many problems in the governance of blockchain networks. And they are basically not good foundations for any structure of democratic decision-making. What we need here is to come up with a way to have a one human, one vote system in digital networks for peer-to-peer schemes where we're also not compromising identities. So looking back at our title here, this is the Proof of Personhood protocol. This is what this is referring to. And Proof of Personhood protocols basically connect each unique human identity to one entity in a domain. So the first generation of these solutions mostly emerged last year in 2019. This was a term that was coined a few years before, but it's really taking traction as a class of solutions recently, more in the past few months. And it's usually composed by an objective component and a subjective component. So the objective component is a financial incentive that keeps everyone in the system incentivized to maintain their IDs and to maintain the system legitimate. And the subjective component is some kind of human input. So instead of financial stake like proof of stake or CPU power like proof of work, in Proof of Personhood, we have some form of subjective human input. This can be voting, this can be vouching, this can be interpreting, but it's basically an activity that is coming from humans. It's a human attribute instead of a machine or a financial attribute. So this kind of human attribute needs to be easy for humans to produce, but hard for artificial intelligence to produce. This way we know that the system cannot be attacked by artificial intelligence. And it also needs to be easy for humans to join once and hard or impossible for humans to join twice, so that we know that this system is not going to be attacked by humans. So the key question here is, what are the strategies that we know of in order to distinguish unique humans from duplicates or AI? So one of the most interesting strategies that I've seen so far, it's called reverse Turing tests. And this is basically an evolution of the CAPTCHA test, which we're more familiar of. The CAPTCHA is usually employed to make sure that humans are not bots. So a reverse Turing test is going, here's an example, it's going to be also used in the same way to make sure whoever is completing this test is a real human being and not an artificial intelligence. So this example, this is the flip test, which was developed by the IDENA network. And on the left side, you have a meaningful story. On the right side, you have a meaningless story. And here, basically, all that you need is common sense reasoning in order to understand which of the two is a meaningful story. So this is very easy for humans, but it's actually not so easy for AI to solve. So the average human accuracy in solving a flip test is 95% in solving a set of them, many in a row. So the human accuracy is around 95%, if I'm not mistaken. And then the AI average has not reached even 70% of accuracy. So this is a very effective way to distinguish between humans and AI. So a few characteristics of reverse Turing tests is that they need to be AI hard. So like I said, difficult for artificial intelligence. And in order to really be AI hard, one of the key insights that was actually brought on by the IDENA network, which created this flip test that I just showed you guys, is that those tests need to be created by humans. So for example, the CAPTCHA test, it's generated algorithmically, and this means that it can be also solved algorithmically. So if you're generating the test if the test is generated by humans, then it can also only be solved by humans. Another element here is that these tests need to be based on images. They are not always, there are many kinds of reverse Turing tests, but they are more likely to remain robust over time if they're based on images, especially now that we're seeing some new development of GPT-3 and different language generators, which really are able to sound like humans. So probably images are going to be more robust over time. And images also provide a framework that can be applied internationally. So you don't need to have the knowledge of a specific language. And then another thing about reverse Turing tests is that they are usually a great strategy against AI attacks, but they are not so much a strategy against human attacks. So potentially a human could solve it many times and pass many times. So this is usually being paired with a different kind of strategy, which is called pseudonym parties. And pseudonym parties are based on a very simple security foundation, which is that each human can only be in one place at a time. So if you're going to a pseudonym party, you don't need to share any kind of information about yourself. All you need to do is be there. And then usually you will have some mechanism to formalize this presence. So maybe you will, each person will have a QR code and they can scan each other's QR codes, or they can establish other mechanisms, and this will lead to a membership token, which then can be used to take membership in an online community. So this also leads to an understanding that doing something in a specific place and time, or a live event, can be a very powerful strategy for Sybil-resistance. And another thing about pseudonym parties is that you can have a virtual version of that. So this is basically what the IDENA network is implementing. This is one of the solutions that we have looked at in our review. So the IDENA network is an independent blockchain where every node of the blockchain is a distinct human identity. So this is a fully decentralized solution. And it's a fully anonymous solution. In order to join it, all you need to do is you need to take part in this ceremony to validate yourself. And this happens synchronously. So the entire network take part in the ceremony at the same time. And in the ceremony, you have a few minutes to solve a set of flip tests. And if you are successful at solving it with a high degree of accuracy, then you can establish a proof of personhood, and you can take part in the IDENA network. This network is also providing a kind of universal income. You can think about it in this way. It has a currency, it's called the DNA currency, and basically you mine this currency by participating, by proving that you're a person in this network. So this is a really interesting example of combining AI hard tests with an element of a pseudonym party. Another strategy is called the web of trust. This is basically establishing proof of personhood by connection to trusted seed identities. So in a web of trust, you can have Sybil nodes and non-Sybil nodes. And then the idea is that it's difficult for Sybil nodes to substantiate their identities by establishing a large number of connections to trusted identities. The effectiveness of this has not been proved yet, but it is a robust theory that has been actually employed by several different proof of personhood protocols, and it's being tested today. So we're going to be learning more about it in the few years to come. But one really interesting project that is using this is called Bright ID. And the interesting insight of Bright ID is basically that you have this app where you can establish links between the different nodes, and this generates a social graph. But the way that you read this social graph can vary. So for example, if I am an app and I want to create an application where only humans can join, then I might establish my own set of seed identities and my own way to interpret this social graph, which I think might be very secure. And then another app might be interpreting this same social graph in a different way. So this is, in a way, an intersectional approach, we call it, because it's looking at many different, it doesn't have a universal truth. It's making it possible for each app to have their own Sybil-resistant mechanism. And what it's doing at the base level is that it's formalizing a social graph, which is made visible to everybody else. So over time, this might lead us to, it might lead to the creation of many, many different ways of analyzing a web of trust, which are going to help us understand what are the best strategies and also what are the ones that don't really work. So this is a really interesting social experiment. It has more challenges to come in terms of decentralization because it's based on trusted seed identities, and of course in the Sybil-resistant aspect, but it has a very robust infrastructure, and I'm really excited to see how it's going to be developing over time. Another strategy is called a token curated registry. And basically TCRs are aiming to create economic incentives for decentralized list curation. So members in a list, they can vouch for new members to join it. And they do that, if they establish a good process for that, then the tokens associated with this list might increase in value. So this is not really a strategy that was aiming at identity verification, but it has been employed to do that and trying to create an incentive system for people to verify each other. So an example of employment of token curated registry was HumanityDAO, which is no longer active, but basically in this list, people just tagged their tweet profile as proof of humanity, and then they could vouch for others, so they could check each other's Twitter profiles if they thought this was a real human or not. There were a few flaws there. It was a pretty simple experiment, which was just aiming to test some of the base assumptions that we have about establishing identity online. And this suffered a few different kinds of attacks. People could change their Twitter name and then subscribe again. They could try to, someone actually made a change to the contract that made it really expensive to join to make yourself to apply as a candidate. So it was costing, I think, around $1,000, and nobody realized that also because not many people, the protocol was so activated. So it was terminated in January this year, but this was actually one of the first experiments to really gain traction in the Ethereum community, and a lot of very prominent members of this community were joining it. But after a few months, the growth kind of stagnated. Another example using TCRs is Kleros. Kleros is basically an organization that is focusing on distributed courts, and the way that they select jurors for those distributed courts is by using token curated registries. So the interesting thing here is that they have appended to their identity verification system this distributed court system. So basically people can apply to join this registry, to submit some biometric information, and then their picture and their name. And then if they join this and someone thinks that they is a fake identity, then this can be taken to the court and then can be adjudicated over there. So it's an interesting answer to the question of who verifies the verifier, a distributed court in this case. DAOs are another strategy which were also not created specifically aiming at the identity verification problem, but they have also started to be used in this way. DAO is an acronym for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. So here people are basically pooling funds, and then they vote on how these funds are going to be allocated. And they do all of the rules that are regarding how this voting is going to happen is basically encoded into smart contracts and also enforced by the smart contracts. So it's basically creating a set constitution that you can trust. And the interesting thing about DAOs is that as opposed to most of the contracts that we know in the blockchain space, DAOs are not so much focused on financial functions, but they entail human decision making. So because they involve humans, they are also being used as an interesting substrate for identity verification. So one of the projects that is looking at this is the Equality Protocol by Democracy Earth. And here, basically, each DAO member gets assigned a score based on the intersection of their DAO memberships. And this protocol is trying to create a meta governance for all of the different identity protocols and DAOs, where people can vote on the legitimacy of those different DAOs. And this subjective input of the voting plus an objective input, which comes from how looking at how democratic is the DAO. So what is the distribution of shares per addresses, leads to a score, and this score is going to be associated with a democratic index. So it's a protocol that is looking at how different protocols can measure their legitimacy. So it's not so much creating an identity verification mechanism in and of itself. And then there's Upala, which Petr is going to be talking to you guys about in a minute. But this is also a very interesting approach, which is basically looking at creating a price identity. So basically, if you're a part of a DAO, you can get assigned a specific score according to how much you are trusted by the members of this DAO to not steal from the DAO. So this means that if you have this score, then you can always steal from the DAO the amount of your score. And this is called a bot explosion in Upala terms. So Petr is going to be talking to you guys more about that, but this is another example of using DAOs to establish trust online. So a few takeaways. The first one is that there's still a lot of work to be done. If we look at the different mechanisms, we can see different pros and cons, but just to mention a few here is that with reverse Turing tests, for example, we don't know if they're going to remain robust over time, if they're going to resist the dynamic development of machine learning. With Web of Trust, we don't know if that's going to actually resist Sybil attacks, and there are many reasons to believe that yes and no. So remains to be seen. And we also need to make sure that all of these protocols are scalable. So one thing that I didn't mention here, but which is very relevant, is that the protocol should be easy to access. I read this tweet the other day that I just want to verify my identity. I don't want to join a cult. And I think that this is something important to keep in mind, that it doesn't need to, it shouldn't feel so, it shouldn't be so burdensome for whoever is verifying their identity. So this is another thing to be keeping in mind. And with that said, I think by looking at all of these approaches, we can say that there's no best approach of the different protocols, or the best of them are really trying to use multiple different schemes. So for example, the IDENA network is based on reverse Turing tests, but you can only do it by getting a code invitation from existing members. So in a sense, this is creating a web of trust. In the Bright ID network, you can, if you are not connected to any of the trusted seed identities or members of the network, then in order to join it, you can join a virtual pseudonym party. They have these meetings happening every week to welcome new members. So really, in fact, what is happening is that all of these different methodologies are being used at the same time. They're co-occurring. And the idea is to use as many different ways as you can to really protect your network. And then a final takeaway is connecting once again to our title, which is that we decided to, when we were writing, we decided to focus on subjective approaches for Sybil-resistance. And the reason why we chose this specific framework is because humans are, at the end of the day, the best tool that we can have, or the best strategy for recognizing other humans. So this was also the insight brought by the IDENA network, that if tests are generated algorithmically, then they can also be solved algorithmically. So we need to start thinking about how we can design human-centered technologies for this kind of problem. So this is the presentation. Our idea in writing this review was really to bring more attention to these protocols. I think that they can use all of the attention that they can get. These are still very much small projects, very primitive attempts so far, but they have an enormous potential to really change our society if one of these really takes off and gets large adoption. and also maintains its legitimacy in the way. So I hope that this review can help lots of people. It can be an entry point for a lot of people to start learning about these systems and also start creating, or who knows, creating different protocols or helping or working on the existing ones. You can check this out by going to my Twitter, which is there. It's @Paula Berman. And if you have any questions, you can also reach out to me in my email and I'll be happy to answer. Unfortunately, I am a bit over time, so I will take one question, but then I need to go, but I'm happy to continue in touch either via email or Twitter.
Yeah, thanks, Paula, for being able to join this really early morning for you, as I understand. And yeah, if there is one question, we can ask Paula. Just take a chance.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me, guys, folks?
Yes, yes.
So, in the Equality Protocol by Democracy Earth, who is approving the DAOs that are surveyed during the scoring of the person?
Well, the idea is for this to be interoperable with as many different protocols as possible now, just because we had to make a choice of where we were going to start looking at this. Sorry, I just want to make a small parenthesis here that in reviewing this, the disclaimer is that I also helped work in the Equality Protocol by Democracy Earth and a very tiny bit in the Claros Protocol. But yeah, with the Equality Protocol, we chose to start looking at Moloch DAOs. And the idea was that because these contracts are very simple, just 400 lines of code, they are also very welcoming for people to just innovate on top of them. So there has been a lot of really legitimate, good open source collaboration around Moloch DAO contracts. So this is a big part of our ethos at Democracy Earth, open source collaboration. So to that, we also saw that there were many different DAOs being created on top of it. So this was just a decision based on, where we saw action happening. But in theory, what we want is for the Equality Protocol to not only be able to look at other DAO protocols, so Aragon, DAO Stack, but also to be interoperable with different identity frameworks. So for example, with the IDENA network, this be enabled with a token swap or with Bright ID. What we would like is to eventually be able to be analyzing all of these different mechanisms.
Great, thanks.
All right.
Well, yeah, thanks a lot, Paul, and we'll distribute the link for the review so that everybody can take a look and dive into this fascinating area. So thanks a lot again.
Yeah, and thank you, Sergey, also for all of your contributions to this work. You're a great mentor in this area and have done a great job in analyzing these different protocols.
Yeah, it's fun. Fun to do. So thanks a lot. And,
all right, bye-bye.
Bye, thanks. Let me now give the mic to Petr, who was already mentioned by Paula as one of the contributors to the paper and founder of the protocol called Upala. So I'll let him to explain more about the explosion of the bots in the context of identity.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sergey. Thank you, Paula, for the introduction to Upala, to Upala protocol. So a little correction, Upala, we renamed it from Price of Personhood to Price of Forgery protocol. So it describes more accurately what we are doing. So, okay, I'll share the screen now. Can you see the presentation? Sorry, can you see Sergey or anyone?
Yeah, we can see your screen. Yes, yes.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. One moment. Where is the? Okay, yeah. So now, so greetings, humans. We are Upala, an anti-Sybil system for the apps and a decentralized identity in the future. So why are we doing this? Today, there is no reliable way to tell humans apart from bots on Ethereum, and neither there is on the traditional web. And in Upala, we believe that over 1 billion people without any ID in the world is a part of the same unique human problem. Actually, quite the same thing that Paula just talked about. So we claim that, not we claim, but just existing solutions out there, most of the existing solutions out there measure the probability of personhood in percents. In Upala, account scores represents how much it would cost to forge this account, and we have dollars instead of percent. So let's see how it works. The first concept is groups. Users join a group, they put their deposit in a pool, and the group assigns scores to all of its users. So in here, for example, every user deposits $1 and gets a $10 score. The group gets a pool of $40 when there are 40 users joined. So notice here that the score is higher than the deposit, so that you virtually getting more than you pay. And this is where the second concept comes in, explosive bots protocol. It ensures that anyone can delete their ID at any time and grab an amount of money corresponding to their score. In our example, a malicious user is able to get $10 from group's pool. You can see that the pool decreases, the number of users decreases. And in this case, sure enough, that other people will not let this person in again. We assume that they all know each other. The third concept is stacking. The same way users join groups, groups gather into hierarchies. Superior groups may require deposits from its subgroups and in turn add extra scores to their users. And the same way scores, the same scores will be paid as explosion rewards to an attacker. I will touch on it a little bit further. This way, groups at the top may acquire, oh, sorry. Yeah, this way groups at the top may acquire large audiences, and they may charge the apps for providing user score, or may earn interest on their huge pools. And the last concept is paths. Both an attacker or a good user need a membership path through the group hierarchy to prove their score. Here, if an attacker would like to explode in this top group with the maximum score, this person needs to prove membership through the group hierarchy to get to that score. So in Upala, any user may join any group may join any group as well. And all the incentives and governance models are totally arbitrary for all groups. The apps in the same way can approve any group and any number of groups as their score providers. And the score providers may choose any governance models as well. So yeah, as I mentioned before, users are incentivized to choose best paths to approve their scores to the apps. So let's say here some D app approved two higher order groups, and a user wants to interact with this D app. There are two ways that this user can calculate his or her score, but this one, the one with $20 is the best for this user. So this user chooses this path and approves himself or herself to the app. So everyone is free to choose. The apps need score providers with huge audiences. Groups in general want huge audiences as well, with reliable humans not willing to explode. Users want groups which provide highest scores with the lowest amount of efforts to acquire such a score. And this creates a market which is similar to insurance, but instead of trading coverage for premium, in Upala, scores are traded for deposits. And not just deposits, but all the efforts needed to acquire such a score. This could be money, the deposit, the reputation that a user stakes in this system, or some kind of work that this user performs, like solving captchas, or as you've seen in IDENA, these puzzles that machines cannot easily solve. So the user score then roughly represents the efforts, these efforts needed to acquire such a score. And at the same time, this is the price of forgery. This is a very reliable threshold for the apps to assess human uniqueness with. It's not just percents, but actual value of the identity, and the apps now can see how much a user values their identity and how much it would cost to forge this identity for a bot or a malicious user. Or maybe how much it would cost to bribe a person to sell their account. So we are not dealing here only with artificial intelligence counterfeits, but with bribery as well. So now to what is possible with Upala. Upala is a protocol. The only constraint within the protocol is this explosion protocol. Everything else is arbitrary. And thanks to that, we can build very different identity systems on top of Upala, or in other words, using Upala protocol. So here we just explored the friendship-based entry test. Yeah, we call this different systems based on Upala dimensions, and the way dimensions allow users in, we call them entry tests. So as you've seen in this friendship dimension, we used friends to allow users in. But this is not the only way to create a identity system or anti-Sybil system on top of Upala. Another way is to use membership in existing DAOs, which is already on chain. We can create a group that allows other groups in, and those groups in turn check membership, like here, a membership in Moloch, a membership in Metacartel DAO, or in other existing DAO are out there. They check if a user belongs to this DAO and let this user in. And in turn, this top group lets this user groups in as well. So these members of DAOs automatically get their scores in this top group. Another possibility is to create wraps around existing communities and identity systems, like the ones mentioned the ones mentioned by Paula in the paper, the Bright ID, the IDINA. We can just somebody could create a group which allows people with IDINA or Bright ID score higher than 80 or let's say 90% and offer them a score which will be defined on how much this group owner or this DAO, how much do they think that these people value their identities within those systems. The same way we could give scores to old GitHub accounts, assuming that these are real people, real humans, or we can give scores to Gitcoin people. Gitcoin is a freelance platform on using Ethereum. They already have reputation scores and users there have portfolios so that they already value their ID. So this is one of the good places to start Upala and to start an identity system based on Upala. And another cool possibility for Upala is to combine all those all different identity systems into one, or into several big ones. For example, a group at the top may may believe that it is not risky to give $1,000 or a very huge score to a person who already has scores in this DAO membership, DAO membership system, in Bright ID, in Gitcoin based or IDINA based Upala group. So this top group assumes that this user will not explode and will not lose all those identities at the same time. So this is a way to give a very high scores to the users, and probably the score will be even higher than a price of forgery of a state ID. So maybe we can have like $10,000 here, and price of forging a Russian passport is like $5,000. I'm not sure, but maybe it is like that. So in this case, the Upala identity may be better than a Russian passport. So that's for the future. For now, we want to start with this DAO membership and maybe Gitcoin. So as a wrap up or takeaways, Upala provides strong incentives to avoid bots. It actually is anti-fragile. The more bots explode, the better the entry tests. And this is all dictated by the market, not just by some entity or even a DAO. So this is very reliable. As a consequence, Upala provides very reliable threshold to the apps, and probably Upala score could be used as a collateral to get a loan or maybe some other financial activity. Upala scoring works a lot like insurance, and the market, the Upala market works a lot like insurance market. And Upala is a fair way of identity pricing. So as I said, price of forgery, you know exactly how much it will almost exactly, or exactly by the market, how much it will cost to forge an identity like that. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. It always helps a lot.
Thanks, Peter. And Yeah, I guess we have time for questions. I actually have one question, like how does the score is assigned in practice? Like you have maybe a new member who's joining the, let's say the system, and it has certain like reputation, but it's known maybe just to part of this, DAO. So how this score is then assigned? Is it like every member of this member of the DAO has to assign certain like score? Like how is then how is decided what is this score, or is standardized like across the DAO based on some formal inputs?
Thanks. So there is no standardization in Upala. Every group decides what scores they would like to assign. It's totally arbitrary. In the beginning, so if we have this one DAO, let's say we want this DAO will decide, this top group will decide that it will assign $5 score to each of Moloch DAO members. And maybe if no one from Moloch DAO explodes, this group could increase the score. And this group can assign different or same scores to other groups and other entry tests. So this is totally, they decide on the score on the risk of explosion. So they probably don't want to assign $1,000 score right away to all Moloch DAO members, because maybe someone will explode with $1,000. But it's safe for them to assign a $5 score to start with.
Okay, get it. And so this somehow came like in like experimental way to conclusion what is the optimal like price of forgery, right? If there's too many explosions, they will probably decrease the price. Something like this, yes. And until they're completely
in the beginning,
bailed out.
it's more like that's a great question too. So in the beginning, we don't have market of groups, so users don't have a choice where to join. In the future, we hope we'll have a lot of different groups, and these scores will be dictated by the market. So users will choose the best ratio of score and efforts, how to get this score. So, and the groups will respond to that demand. So groups want to give the highest scores to its users to attract more users, but at the same time, they don't want to attract too many bots. If there is very little effort to get the score, a lot of bots will come to this group and explode and drain the pool. So this is the market. We want a lot of users, but we don't want a lot of bots, and we balance this with a score amount and amount of efforts needed to get this score. This is for the future. This is how the market will work. But for now, yeah, it's experimental. And another way to do it now is what we imagined is, for example, in Gitcoin or in any other existing community, we may become a filter which will sieve out the unreliable people. So we come to a platform like Gitcoin or any other. We say that all existing users get $10 score right away. Some of them will explode immediately. Some will remain. Then we let new members to get this same $10 score after depositing $1. So we get new people coming in, which will also get $10 score, but they didn't join for free, but for $1. We can now increase like from $10 to $50. Some people will explode again. And so like this, we can create a very trusted kernel of a very trusted community within the community. So, and we can proceed with this like virtually to infinity. So this is one way of experimenting.
Okay, got it. Any other questions for Petr? So thank you very much. I think we're very much looking forward to your first release of the Upala. I mean, to try the Blade Runner, what I called. So yeah, we wish you like all the luck to start.
Thanks.
And we have a final talk for today. It was not initially on the schedule, but we thought it's going to be a valuable contribution to our summer school session. I'd like to introduce Andreas Fletcher from the Trustlines network, which from I was actually quite curious to discover it. It's already live and up and running, and it's a mutual credit network, which original idea was not to create an identity, but as a result of this network, the identity could be derived from the social graph of the this mutual credits in people. So Andreas will be happy if you explain.
Yes. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. And as you pointed out, so this is actually not directly linked to identity. So in the presentation, I'll try to explicitly highlight the identity components, since this is more identity-focused group. Let me share my screen. I'll go through the standard presentation that we have. Okay, so yeah, so my name is Andreas Fletcher. I work for BrainBot Technologies, and we're contributing to Trustlines, which is basically led by a nonprofit foundation. BrainBot initially started the project, but gave over all the trademark rights and code to the foundation because we thought a social impact project, which Trustlines is supposed to be and is, should be like led by community and nonprofit organization. So real quick, what is Trustlines and how does Trustlines fit in with financial inclusion? So the idea behind Trustlines is nothing really new. It's more taking combinations of blockchain and mutual credit concept, combining them and creating a new type of money or a new way of money, which we call or refer to as people-powered money, because the power of the money actually is within the hands of the people themselves. So if you are familiar with crypto space, etc., you might remember back in the early days, there was also a Ripple Pay, which is similar to Trustlines. There's also a lot of different mutual credit systems out there that are up and running. In Sardinia, there's, for example, Zadex. We have also the VIA from the VIA Bank that all rely on the concept of mutual credit. Most of them don't have the component of blockchain, which we thought it was important because we wanted to provide a technology that you could also use in countries and regions where the government may want to shut you down. But with the setup of our sidechain to Ethereum, basically it's really, really hard And I'll also go into detail on how the validators for that sidechain are determined, because it's probably also a very interesting component regarding identity. Adding some info on what Paula presented, different proof of different consensus mechanism. So what is a better type of money? And Trustlines focuses on a type of money that is accessible to anybody. It does not rely on any KYC processes or on actually having an existing value. So if you look at traditional banking systems, you always need to either be within that financial system to be part of it. You have to go to a bank, you have to register, you have to leave all your personal information there, which some people don't want to do. But if you also look at the statistics, we have 1.7 billion people that are unbanked, and that's a problem. And the financial system is either unable or probably more unwilling to bank these people. The other thing is that if you look at Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency, to actually use this, you need to have it. And getting it is also mostly a hard process in either buying it from somebody that you either trust or don't trust, or also registering on any crypto exchange, where you nowadays also have to basically go through a very similar process in opening banks. And we wanted to develop a type of money where you don't have to go through the hassle. The other criteria for us was that it needs to be censorship resistant. So it needs to be on some kind of infrastructure that provides censorship resistant, and it also needs to be in a way that it's not able to be shut off, but also be in a way that people can actually afford it. Recent Ethereum transaction costs prove that the Ethereum main chain is probably currently at least not in the best state to have a lot of transaction on it, especially in the countries where, I don't know, transaction costs between anything above 50 cents, euro cents, or dollar cents is way too much for people in unbanked regions to just pay for doing a transaction. And the third criteria is the human-centric monetary design. We wanted to develop a type of money that really brings the power of the money back to the people, into their hands, and gives them their value and the value creation process. So Trustlines is basically mutual credit that's based on network of individuals that have trust relationships. And the trust relationships is the key component here. You have two people. In this case, you have Alice and Bob. And to explain what a trust line is and what mutual credit is, you basically have one person, Alice, giving Bob a credit limit. In this case, it's 10. So Alice can borrow up to 10 euros from Bob, and Bob can borrow up to 10 euros from Alice. This means that Alice can actually pay Bob with this credit balance that she has by issuing an IOU. So if Alice wants to buy something from Bob in worth of $5, she says, I'm going to buy this from you, but I'm not going to give you real money. I'm just going to owe you something.
Andreas, just a question. Are you trying to show the presentation? Because I think we still see the first slide of your presentation. I mean, at least for me, it's like it's not scrolling.
Yeah, maybe I'm showing the wrong screen then.
Just to make sure.
Okay.
Right.
You see it now?
Yeah, we see it now, yes.
Okay. So let's start from the beginning. Hello, my name is Anna. Just kidding. Okay, so this is the slide regarding the human-centric, accessible, censorship-resistant, human-centric monetary design. And then this is basically a nice picture of the web of trust that we have, or that you can create. And this was the slides that I was just talking about. So Alice in this case, Bob in this case, they both issue a credit line of 10, which means that Alice can pay Bob not by giving him real physical money or giving him cryptocurrency, but rather than just saying, hey, I owe you this money now. But since I owe you this money, please give me something in return that I want to buy. So this works very well between friends, family, people that you trust, because in your daily life, you always come up to a situation where you're out with your friends, or you go somewhere and you want to buy something and you might not have enough money, or you might lost your wallet, and you tell your friends, hey, can you buy this for me? Or could you pay the beer and I'll pay it back to you next time, etc. The problem is that this does not work very well with people that you don't trust. So in this case, Charlie would be a person that Alice does not trust, or Charlie does not trust Alice. So there's no real way for them to interact on a trust relationship. Because if Alice would want to buy something from Charlie and say, hey, I'll give you an IOU, then Charlie would say, I don't know you. I don't want to be in a position where you owe me money, and I basically don't know if I would get it back. And the difference between like community currencies or cryptocurrencies or real cash is that in most of the cases where people are allowed to pay strangers, the trust is not within the person that they receive the payment from, but the trust is from the value that they're receiving. So you give me 5 Bitcoins, you give me 5 Ether, you give me 5 euros. I don't trust the person that gives it to me. I trust the value that they hand over to me. And this is basically something that we also want to eliminate, because in a lot of regions, it could very well be that people don't necessarily have something before they want to exchange. So it could be that Alice doesn't have anything currently. She doesn't have 5 euros. She doesn't have something that she can actually pay with, that a person that she does not know trusts, but she only has herself and her own trustworthiness towards that person to basically say, I will give you this money back, or you can get something from me what is the same value, so that the debt that I have towards you gets cleared out. So how do we enable that people that don't trust each other can pay each other? It's basically by discovering a path of trusted people connected to each other, so that if, in this case, Alice wants to buy something from Charlie, Charlie is able to actually receive a payment as IOU from a person that he trusts, and Alice is able to pay somebody that she does not trust, and vice versa. But nobody is in a bad side or has a bad opinion about if he would get the money back or not, because in this case, we have Bob, and Bob is a trustworthy person because Alice trusts Bob, Bob trusts Alice, Bob trusts Charlie, and Charlie trusts Bob in this case too. So what can happen is that Alice now owes Bob 5 and Bob owes Charlie 5. So that Charlie basically says, okay, somebody that I trust, that identity that I can prove, owes me money now, and I can give this to a person that I don't necessarily trust. Now, Bob has the same value as before, because even though he owes 5 to Charlie now, Alice owes him 5. So his net balance basically stays the same. And if you create a system that expands above 2 or 3 person, you'll basically go into hopefully an ecosystem where you also don't have to settle money outside of the system to cancel out the debt, because you could mean that in this case people would exchange and one person would always have then the debt, but the system that we have is designed in a way that paths are also chosen so that the debt in total gets reduced. So for this case, Dave would want to pay something to Bob, and Charlie would be the middleman. So the IOU that Charlie has towards the IOU that Bob has towards Charlie would basically be canceled out, because Dave would owe something to Charlie and Charlie would owe something to Bob. But since Bob owes something to Charlie, that debt basically gets canceled out. Sybil attacks is not really possible in this system, because each person only trusts a person that he finds trustworthy. So if you have a person called Eve, for example, that creates hundreds of trust lines with herself and has a balance of hundreds of thousands of euros, it's fake credit and she can interact with herself, but as soon as she wants to interact with the system, she's always bottlenecked by a person that trusts her or does not trust her. So in this case, it would be Alice, and Alice would know Eve and would say basically, hey, Eve, I know that you do shady stuff. I don't really trust you in an amount higher than 10. So Eve could only pay up to 10 euros within the system in total. So that identity basically also reflects in, I know his person, I don't trust that person necessarily, I won't give him a high enough credit limit that he can basically run away and I'm there with a lot of debt and don't get my money back. The question is this money? Well, you can use it as money, you can use it as a payment. As long as people accept it, you can use it as money. It doesn't reflect the typical type of money where you either have like government issued money, or you have commercial bank money, or you have commodity bank money, but you have the concept of mutual credit and allow people to generate their own value and their own money. And that's why we basically call it people-powered money. I'm going now into the technology component. So if you have any questions to the specific mutual credit component, you can do that, or we can also do it at the end. I don't care. Let's do it at the end. The Trustlines protocol itself is basically specific components that allow people to interact with our blockchain. We have a sidechain to Ethereum. It's run by about 30 validators currently. It's up and running since last year, November. And for this session, I'd like to go a little bit into how we define the validator set, because that's always a little bit tricky and challenging, or it was at least tricky and challenging how we want to do that. You see the slide now, right? The new one? Okay. So as we thought about how we could design the blockchain in a way that it's censorship resistant, we looked at the different consensus models out there. We had proof of work, we had proof of authority, we had proof of stake, and we basically decided that none of these really fit our criteria, because we wanted to have a consensus algorithm that does not cost a lot of money, people are not known, and also the stake component could result in one person having multiple accounts and running multiple validator nodes. So what we did is we designed a proof of sociality, which basically is we have 10 anchor points within Twitter, and we allow people to send us a Twitter message to a specific account that we have and send us their email address. We then check if these people that gave us their email address are within a trusted graph that we defined with these 10 people as anchor points, basically being if that person that we trust follows this person, or if he follows somebody that follows that person, we assume that they're within our trusted community, because it's important that that person follows that person and not other ways around, because I could create account or 10 accounts and follow one specific person, but one person would probably not follow 10 times the same person with 10 different accounts. So it's not a 100% security, but it's a little bit reducing the risk that we have one person with multiple accounts. What we then do is we invite these people to a survey. And in this survey, people are allowed to send us their Ethereum address, with which they will take part in a validator auction on the Ethereum chain, and basically are whitelisted in that auction. So we don't have any connection between the email address and the Ethereum address. So even though it's potentially, we have like a set of, like we had 500 email addresses last time, and we got like 40 Ethereum addresses, 100 Ethereum addresses, we cannot map the email addresses to the Ethereum addresses. And yeah, that's basically how we define the people that are running the chain, by going through this process and trying to minimize the risk that one person runs multiple nodes, but also trying to eliminate the risk that we or the foundation knows who is actually running the node, because it could very well be that, I don't know, the government comes and says, we'd like to know who is running your chain, which we have in proof of authority chains. And we called it MPOS, which is minimal viable proof of stake, because you still stake on the chain, but it's also a combination about with proof of authority, basically. You can try it out. We have the Trustlines app up and running. You can download it at this website and basically just download it. You'll need a trusted friend. That's basically how you get started with Trustlines. You always need one specific friend that you want to interact with and exchange this mutual credit IOUs. It's useful for one person already with a second person, and you don't necessarily need to be part of the big network that is there. If you look at what we currently have on Trustlines, we have 47 different currencies deployed, and we have, like, in the highest currency network, which is beer, we have about 320 people interacting with each other, and very high connectivity because we went around to Ethereum conferences and onboarded people on the beer network, basically saying, let's open a trust line and I'll owe you a beer if you want to. Questions?
Yeah, I got a question. What is an incentive to add more connections for a person to add more trust lines?
Yes. So adding more trust lines with one single person is only important if you want to exchange in a different value. So for example, I mostly have trust lines opened in the currency network Euro and beer, because sometimes I go to the supermarket and buy food for my co-workers and I want them to owe me money for that, but I don't necessarily want to have the cash because at some point of time they'll go shopping and they can pay then for me and we'll just cancel out the debt that we have with each other. Yeah? In a different scenario, we would go and buy drinks for each other, and we don't also have to like that's like the one of the most use cases, right? If you go out with friends, you'll buy a round, they'll buy a round, and you can just keep track within the Trustlines app how much beers you owe each other.
Is there, sorry, I just want to specify a little bit the question. Is there an incentive to have multiple connections within one currency?
Yeah,
because that's what the system needs, as far as I understand.
Yes, yes. Wanted to come to that, but yes.
Sorry. Yeah.
All good. All good. Okay. It depends on what you want to do with it. Yeah. So if you only want to interact with friends and family, that's all the trust lines that you need. Yeah. If you want to pay people that are not within your friends and family, you have to have some connectivity, and increasing the trust lines numbers that you have with people that you know. And if they're doing the same thing, the connectivity that you have is just higher, and the chance that somebody is within the path of networks of trusted people, even though that you don't know him, allows you basically to pay people that you don't know. So it just increases the possibility that you can pay people that you don't know.
Oh, okay. So, and you don't have any commission when the path comes through you?
So within the deployed currency networks, the people that provide the capacity to ripple through, they receive a small fee. It's, I think, like 0.01%. So just basically because these people provide the path of liquidity to allow this. Yeah. And it's not much, but it allows people to say, yeah, let's open trust lines. And if you ripple through me, then I'll take a small percentage just because I have to track that I owe you money now and he owes me money now.
Okay, got it.
It's also to basically calculate the costs of a path, because depending on how much imbalance you create in the system, the protocol wants to choose the path that reduces imbalance or creates the less not the most imbalance. So it will always go through people that either reduces the debt that you have in the system or that increases not too much.
Okay. Yeah, and another connected questions with that, who is calculating the shortest path? So this is a super hard problem as far as I understand in this huge graph. And it's important because you want the shortest path. So what is the incentive and who is calculating the shortest path?
Yeah, so we have so here, like we have the app. The app uses a client library to connect to a relay server, and the relay server indexes the currency networks and also the graph within those currency networks. So when a user wants to send a transaction to somebody, the relay server itself will check what the shortest path is based on the current state of the graph, and then basically suggest a path to you that you can take. So it's centralized relay servers. Yeah.
Okay. So there is no incentive to run this server for other people except for.
There is. So if so, we have also a delegate. The relay server itself acts as a delegate. So one thing that we wanted to avoid is that people download the app and feel like that this is a crypto-related app. Also, most people that we talk to, they don't care if it's a crypto app. So the most crypto apps that you download, you want to use, and then you come to the point, I need transaction costs. I need this kind of funny thing that's called Ether to pay for gas. I don't know what this is. Yeah. So in our case, we said, no, the users will not need to deal with cryptocurrencies. So the delegate, which is also part of the relay server, basically pays for the transactions of the users that are connected to him. For this, he can either do this for free or he can have some type of monetization policy in place. The one thing that we have is that, for example, if I would pay you one beer or €1 or €5, the delegate can say for each transactions that you send through me and I pay for you, I want to have 0.001 IOU from you. So that at a point when there's a trust lines between you and the delegate could also pay stuff within the trusted relationship that you guys have and the paths.
Got it.
Yeah, and we use basically just concept of meta transaction for that. So that's the motivation for anybody wanting to run a relay server. He can either run his own server because he doesn't trust any other server and wants to have just a server for him. Or he would, I don't know, want to choose the way the path is calculated, or he wants to make money by providing the service for paying for transaction costs. Also the validators themselves, because they also earn Trustlines network coins because they're basically mining the chain. They have a lot of TLC that they might want to spend and receive something else for it. And that's also a service that they could offer.
Makes sense.
Andreas, I got a question. The motivation you mentioned that it's kind of really useful for the like unbanked population which has no access to the convenient banking payment systems. So like, are there any plans in your like foundation roadmap to basically promote this this network, this Trustlines technology in some areas where there are people like who are unbanked?
Yeah, definitely. Like the unbanked, it has been one of the highest target groups that we actually try to reach and get onboarded to this. To be honest, it's really hard to find unbanks that want to use this kind of stuff. Yeah, mostly they have different problems. Yeah, we had like a lot of conversation with people in Venezuela or Lebanon, or just like regions where we thought, okay, this could actually help because it's an alternative financial system. But mostly they have totally different problems. Like the people that we had or talked to in Venezuela, they like said, yeah, we don't know where we'll get water tomorrow. I said like, okay, Trustlines will not help you with this. Yeah, so it's hard to find a specific group of people that actually have a benefit of this. But we're still working on it. We're still engaged with a lot of people. We're building up a chapter model so that people can basically receive information from us and exactly explanations how they can use this to help them. We're focusing on specific communities that, for example, want to have time banking concepts and use this for time banking or for local currencies, etc. Yeah, so we're definitely working on this.
And bridging back to the identity problem, like, is it something that you would foresee to kind of to be derived from your network, like the some sort of humanity score based on the graph of the.
Yes. So like one advantage towards trust lines compared to banking is banks always give credit based on facts and numbers, where in trust lines you can basically create credit based on the identity that you have with that person. So that makes you think about possible things that you could do with trust lines, like banks could change the concept of how they define who gets credit or not. They could use trust lines also and see, for example, how much money are your friends willing to give you, and then we could also add that in our calculation of credit that we give to you. And that all goes back then to a social graph of trusted people and seeing how much money they're willing to lend you, and then have like a social scoring, a credit scoring based on social friends and families that trust you with money. You could do these things.
Yeah, sounds great. I mean, this is, for me, it's one of the promising ways to like really put like also in Peter's terms, the price of forgery, right? So if you have those credit, directly.
And by the way, why do you use Twitter instead of trust lines to approve validators?
How would we approach trust? How would we approach over trust lines? Oh, that's a good point. Maybe that's a good idea. So you're saying you could use the unique IDs of the Trustlines people themselves. Yeah,
you
that's
have
a little
graph,
tricky.
the social graph.
We could do that.
Yeah,
we could do that. Like each person has an Ethereum address and they could use that Ethereum address to take part in the validator auction. We could do that. That's possible. The problem is we have like slashing condition. We have one slashing condition within the Trustlines blockchain, and it also slashes anything that you stake on the Ethereum chain. And it's only triggered when you do equivocation. So if you mine a block with the same block header, but different content, basically resulting in a hard fork. So we want to avoid this. Using the same address for multiple purposes or multiple things always increases the risk that a transaction could look like a transaction that also results in you being slashed. And that's why we always say to the people that do the validator auction, we always say create a new and fresh Ethereum address that you're not using for anything else, just to reduce the risk that something gets slashed from you. But yeah, that's actually a good idea. I'll take that into consideration. That's thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so with this, I think we need to wrap up the summer school session. So thank you very much, Andreas. It's been a real pleasure to have you.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for the last minute, taking up the invitation to join. And thanks to all the participants who can spend the time with us. And I think it was enriching. And this, as you see, this identity space is really an experimental playing field, which is just emerged last year probably. And I think in a year from now we'll meet here maybe again and discuss like how the things progressed, and I expect they'll be progressed a lot in all the protocols we discussed today. So thanks a lot again, everyone, and see you next year.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Всем пока.